Hi, everybody. Mike Handcock here, the chairman of the Circle of Excellence group of companies. And today you are on a webinar to find out about webinars. How weird is that, right? So we're going to be sharing actually some tools and techniques that don't come from me, but come from somebody who I think is really good at webinars. And I was tempted to share our own stuff, but I like to give you something different as well. So that's what we're going to be doing a little bit today. So let's do the screen share. And once we've got that underway, we are going to definitely come and talk about webinars and what's going on with them at the moment, and what's new and what's not new. And I'm actually going to start here with some really interesting statistics for you as well. So once I actually get around to kicking up the presentation here, there we go. So it should be on your screen in a second. It's just I had to reopen it. But as I said, I want to really start with some really great stuff about why webinars are useful. And I've got some statistical data for you that is so recent. It's actually only last week, in fact, that this data came out. So that's very, very useful. Okay, let's try that screen share again. Here we go. If you are listening to this, you're not going to get the benefit of a screen share, so you're going to have to listen real hard. Okay, finally you can see the front page here and how webinars can help you in your business. So let's start by having a look at some of the three things that we're going to be talking about today. So firstly, we're going to talk about how webinars can be put together and what I call the perfect webinar. And this is where I'm going to use technology that's not from me, but this is from somebody who has built some of the best webinars of all time. So I think we need to listen to what they're talking about. Then secondly, we're going to be understanding the different uses of a webinar, and there are different uses of a webinar. And lastly, we're going to be looking at how we can motivate you to start selling your services via webinar. So this is something you may think, oh, well, it's new. If you're new to us, then you may think, oh, how long have you guys been doing webinars? We were running our first webinars in 2006. So it's 18 years ago. In 2007, I had one of my best sales ever on a webinar. It's not my best sale, but I sold $80,000 US on a webinar. So, they've been pretty good to us over the years. Occasionally we blow one out, but for the most part, webinars where we're selling things have been really, really useful for us. So let's have a look at some data now. And this is from Zoom. This is Zoom's data captured across all of their members. And it's only literally over a couple of weeks old. So this is the latest data. And there's a number of things in their data, but I've pulled out 5 key areas. What Zoom is saying is the average lead cost is $74. Now, that's really interesting because if you're looking at a webinar where you're saying that you're going to have, say, 100 people on there, well, and you're going to drive that traffic to there through Facebook ads, Google ads, etc., you're basically going to be spending $7,400 to get those people there currently. So that's a very interesting statistic because what it tells me is it tells me that the average lead is starting to get quite expensive. Now, we'd always budgeted it at $100, so this is less. And if you're clever, you can bring your costs right down, and we'll talk about that as well. But if it's going to cost you $7,400 to have 100 people on a webinar, you want to be selling something that's worth, at least $1,000 or perhaps more. And we're going to be talking about the sweet spots on a webinar as well. Secondly, listen to this. This is something I learned from Zoom, and it's something that we're going to adjust because of this. Wednesdays for a webinar have a 14% higher turn-up rate than any other day of the week. Now, we've traditionally run our sales webinars on a Thursday. Now, Thursdays are the second best day, believe it or not, but Wednesdays are 14% better than any other day in the week. So that's pretty phenomenal stuff. Let me just check the chat. Oh, Router's congratulating Mel, so that's nice. Let's go to our third statistic here. 2/3 of webinars that people are running at the moment are educational. So this is an educational webinar that we're doing today. So there's nothing for sale today. So you don't have to worry or anything like that. You know, you don't have to get your checkbooks out to be here today. This is educational. And probably, I would say 2/3 of our webinars at least are educational, probably as much, maybe even 85% of our webinars are educational for us. But 2/3 of webinars that Zoom run are educational. They run a lot of webinars. Webinars during business hours, listen to this one, get twice the response. So you may think oh, gee, I'm going to run a webinar. I better put it after hours because, you know, people are going to be busy during the day. Cut that one. Out right now, gone. So webinars during business hours double the response of a webinar after hours. And to be frank with you, I never attend webinars after hours. In fact, I've been considering attending an online summit in a couple of weeks, but it's after hours. And I just know that even if I register, I'm probably not going to turn up because I'm tired at the end of the day. And the last thing I want to do is have more input into my mind. So I think a lot of people are thinking that. This becomes difficult when you run global webinars, such as we do, because, you know, it's evening in New Zealand now. We've got some people from New Zealand on there. So congratulations for being here. We know if we ran this in New Zealand in the morning, we get a higher turn-up rate, but we also run it where we've got the best time zone. And our best time zones for us is the European time zone down into Africa. So that's something to consider. So the last thing that I want to do on this is give you one more statistic here. And that statistic is, come on, buddy, average attendance. And this might surprise you because people say, oh, people don't turn up to webinars. But the average attendance based on Zoom's own data is 57% of sign up for webinars. Now, you didn't have to sign up for this webinar. This is an educational webinar. So most of the ones where people have to sign up for are sales webinars, because on a sales webinar, you want to capture the person's email address and you want to know who's coming to your webinar. We've run 2 sales webinars in the last month. We've got another one coming up in the next couple of weeks. So on average, we will get somewhere between 100 and 150 registrations for a sales webinar, depending on the topic and the audience that we're targeting. So we did one with Landi just 2 weeks ago. She had 102 registrations for that. I did one about 2 weeks before that. I had 143, I think, registrations for that one. Now, that's not our turn-up rate, okay? Our turn-up rate is around about 50%. So it's probably in the area of attendance rate to sign up, around about 57%. So what can you learn from this? You can learn that if you're running a webinar and, for example, you have 100 people sign up for this webinar, but then only 35 people attend your webinar, you can assume that your brand draw is not what it should be. So therefore, you have a positioning problem. So we talk about positioning enough. If you're not at least at the 50% range here, you've got a positioning problem. If you're getting a turn-up rate of 70 or 80%, you've got a really good thing going on, okay? So so that means that you're got high attention from your list. And of course, if you're advertising for people to come to a webinar, your range of people is probably going to be lower than if you're going through lists and other people. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Let me just quickly go to the chat and let's see what you're all chatting about. 5 p.m. in Melbourne. Thank you, Philippe. I thought it was more chats up there, but no, they're the only ones I can see. Okay, great. So let's move on. What do you use a webinar for? So a webinar has multi-purposes, which is why I chose this nice picture from the mountains in China. This is a real mountain, by the way, in outback China that you can go to that's sitting behind me here. And so firstly, you can use it for sales, right? And don't think that you can't sell your services and products on webinar. I'm going to share with you a couple of people that we know and what they sell on webinars that are quite surprising. Secondly, you can use it for training. So you can use webinars to train your staff. You can use webinars to train your clients. what's a webinar? Isn't that a wascally wabbit? And then you can use them for education. So today's webinar is all about education. So that's what we're using it for today. But you can also use them for networking. And I think this is a really underrated way of doing networking in a virtual space, particularly if you have an audience that's a little bit global and can't come together in a physical space, or over, the country, and can't come together in a physical space. Start to do some online networking. Make use of things like the breakout rooms in Zoom and things like that to set people questions, allow them to network and do things. And then, of course, and I think this is one of the most underrated things that people use webinars for, but in my mind should be one of the most highly rated things, is showcasing. Showcasing your products, showcasing your services, showcasing what's coming next. Simple information webinars where, for instance, let me tell you what we've got coming next that you may want to know about. We've got our Bali Business School coming up from the 15th to the 19th of September. Some of you are coming. Some of you may be hearing this for the first time. Yes, we've got 1 or 2 places left, but you're going to have to be quick because we're probably going to close it off in the next week. So from that, you can showcase that sort of thing. You can showcase other events that you've got coming up. You can showcase product launches that you may be going to have. So there's multiple uses for webinars. And what's really good about them is that you can set them up quickly. If you can get comfortable with Zoom, and if you're prepared to go deep into the Zoom technology, there's a lot of stuff even we don't use in the Zoom technology. Like we rarely use polls and anything like that on our webinars. We tend to use Mentimeter or something like that so that we can hold on to the data a little bit longer. But there are different models for webinars that you can use. Okay. So now I want to go to you guys. Actually, I want to go to the chat and I want to ask you, what do you think the 3 keys are to really great webinars? Now, this is a combination of what we believe and a combination of what also came out of the Zoom stuff as well, which, as I said, is really recent. Thanks, Philippe, for putting up Bali Business School here. You attended one a few years ago, and it's fantastic. If anybody who doesn't know about us who's on this call wants to come, just contact me and I'll share with you a decent price that we've got on the ticket, which you can save some money on the website price. Thank you. So what do you think in a good webinar are the 3 things? Let's go to the chat. Let's get some feedback from the group here and let's see what you come up with. Hey, Jilly, lovely to see you here. I saw you pop in. Not trying to pack too many topics into things on the one webinar. Couldn't agree with you more. That's definitely the case. Philippe, build trust. Great, brilliant. Build rapport and demonstrate your skills and expertise. They're 3 fantastic things. Now, I'm going to come up with 3 things that are different than you guys, or maybe they're the same. So don't worry that your things are not good. They're really good and you should have all of these. I just think these are 3 top things. Technology that works smoothly. How true that is, Diane. On podcasts, which are different than webinars, there's quite a bit of different technology around. And I've been on a lot of podcasts lately. We do a lot of podcasts, but I've been on a lot of podcasts. I've probably been on 5 in the last month. I'd say maybe it's more than that. And I can tell you that as soon as somebody has Squadcast as their podcast technology, I write to them and say, do you have anything else that we can use? Because every single time I've used Squadcast, we've had tech problems with bandwidth. And they tell me that they have tech problems with bandwidth on that outside of the US and the UK. Fantastic to know that, whereas Riverside FM, which is the biggest competitor to Squadcast, has no technology issues. It just works perfectly. So that's a great comment. Visual content, absolutely essential. So, I'm using a variety of visual content here. As you can see, my backgrounds have got nothing to do with webinars. There's only so many photos you can have of a person looking at a screen before it becomes boring. Theo, a compelling topic. Absolutely 100%. You are right as well. So all of you are right. But here's the first thing, and I've just displayed it. Engagement. So if you're having webinars and it's one-way traffic, in other words, you're not interacting with the people on the other side of the webinar, regularly during the webinar, then it's going to be like watching the news, okay? About as interesting as that. So number one thing for me is engagement. You have to be able to engage in webinars. So even the way I'm talking to you now is I'm talking to you just like I'd talk to you if you were in the room with me or if I was standing on a stage. I'm not sitting on a webinar going, okay, so the number one thing is engagement, right? You have to be engaging and you have to have backwards and forwards feedback loops. I can already see by the comments here who's engaged here and who's got me on silent. Yes, I know. Some of you come along and you go, okay, I'm going to come with a Mike's webinar because I want him to see me here, but you don't engage, right? So I already know that. So if you're a person who's here but not engaging, now's a good time to go to the chat and go, Mike, I'm actually here and I'm actually listening if you haven't made a comment before. Oh, there's somebody. That's perfect. Let's see who it is, Diane. Oh, you're just laughing. That's fantastic. Okay, number 2 is curiosity and novelty. So to have a great webinar, I think you've got to put something in here that's really spikes people's curiosity. We're all 5-year-old children trapped in adults' bodies. And it's got to be a little bit novel as well. So whether that's imagery, whether that's video that you're using, I used data. So I went and found the latest webinar data that I could to kick off today's webinar. Why? Because I knew it would create some novelty and curiosity there. But also, even this slide itself, so what are the 3 keys to good webinars? Doing this backwards and forwards engagement with you guys is also creating curiosity and novelty as to, okay, I bet you all can't wait to hear what the number 3 thing is. The number 3 thing is, and some of you have alluded to this, is structure. Having the right structure in a webinar, having something that makes sense, that leads to a natural conclusion. They're definitely things that are, for me, 3 things that I like to build into any webinar. Let's see who else is, oh, you're clapping. Oh, you're here, Anthony. I saw you come in. Welcome from Stockholm. And I was talking about you yesterday with somebody else from Sweden, in fact. So spell check curiosity. Oh, thank you, Diane. That's what happens when you do this at 6 o'clock in the morning, is you don't have spell check on, and it doesn't pick it up because, of course, I've got the hyphen in there or the backslash straight into novelty. Otherwise, it would have picked it up. Okay, so now that Diane has corrected me on my curious way I spell curiosity, let's move on. So, how to fill your webinar? So, firstly, though, it's important to know who's your leaser. For those of you that are joining us for the first time or the first couple of times that may not be familiar with this terminology that Landi and Mike use all of the time at Circle of Excellence, your leaser is your perfect client. So Lisa is not a demographic. Lisa is not a psychographic. Lisa is actually a human being, because we don't do business with companies, we do business with people. So even if you're in a business-to-business business where your companies that you might be trying to attract are Air New Zealand or ABSA Bank or something like that, you're not trying to deal with them. You're trying to deal with a particular individual in that company, and they are a person. So you need to understand your leaser. What do they look like? What do they sound like? What are their likes and dislikes? What's some of their demographics? What's their value system? That's the first thing. So you want to fill your webinar full of leases. If you don't have leases, particularly if you're selling, it doesn't matter so much with educational stuff like today. This is for all of you. But if we're selling on a webinar, we're trying to fill that webinar full of Mike and Landi's leases. Conscious leaders and entrepreneurs who value freedom, prosperity, and purpose, who want to make an impact on the world and want to make the world a better place. They're our leases. They come in all shapes and sizes, so do leases, but they're our leases. So number 1 is your existing list. So what if you don't have a list? And, I got asked this question yesterday. Anthony says, I'll do a webinar on the book. Check Anthony's latest book. Great. Thanks, guys. So I got asked this question yesterday, and the person who asked me this question I was back and forwards with on WhatsApp is on this webinar, which is great. And I told them, go and download all of your contacts off your Gmail. So whoever you've been talking to, you can get a list off Gmail of who all those people are. There's a list. And, you know, if you've had Gmail for a few years, I think I've been using it for, 15 years or something. I've got thousands of people. There's thousands of people in that list. Now, you have to go through them because some of those people are reply@asbbank.co.nz or something like that. But, you know, half of them will be real people, and there'll be a lot of your leases in that. Secondly, is go to your phone and download your contact lists off your phone. You're going to have a lot of people's email addresses and things like that on your phone, and there's going to be a lot of potential leases sitting on your phone. So even if you don't have a list on MailChimp or something else like that, then you've probably got a list that you can start to build off that, and this can be the start of the way in which you can do it. Social media. Post about your upcoming webinars on social media. So for instance, we post about these webinars in our Octopus Tribe and our Circle of Excellence group. It's not for the general public. You know, you cannot come to these webinars unless you are affiliated with us in some way, okay? Generally a Circle of Excellence member. So that's okay. If we were going to the general public, we've got a couple of events coming up with our webinars. We post on LinkedIn, we post on Facebook, we post on Instagram about those three. So whatever you are, do your TikTok dances to your social media about your upcoming webinar. Then third way, which is honestly so underrated and so forgotten about people, is that there are partners and affiliates who can put people into your webinars. Now, I always come back to the thing that I say to our new Circle of Excellence members when I'm actually going through our sales process with them. Success equals the amount of value something has multiplied by how you leverage that value. So if you are focusing on leverage, your value is your webinar itself, your webinar content, then how do you leverage it? Well, you can leverage it through your existing list. You can leverage it through social media. But one of the best ways to leverage it is through partners and affiliates. If you're selling something, there could be some people who want to put people into your webinar who are going to get a cut of what you sell. You're going to pay for marketing, for ads and anything anyway. So why not just pay some money to people who are bringing people to your webinar? And then obviously the fourth part is advertising. If any of you have any other ways that you think that you can fill webinars, go to the chat and let's know if you've got anything else before I move on. So who's your leaser? And then these four methodologies. And from that, you should aim to get, I think for a good webinar, you should aim to get 100 registrations, knowing that you'll get about 50 turn up, and at worst case scenario, you'll have about 30 turn up. There's nothing worse than a webinar that you're running where you have like 2 people on it, okay? That's only because you haven't marketed it well, your topic's not interesting, you're not interesting enough yet, you haven't positioned well. Okay, so what sells on a webinar? Now, firstly, I want to talk about products a little bit, and then I want to talk about services. Now, I've got 2 pictures that go with this. And the first picture, if you've ever watched the John Wick movies with Keanu Reeves, you might have seen this on the movies. This is a friend of ours, and he does something a little unique. Actually, I'm going to go to the chat, and when I show this picture, I'm going to ask you exactly what state he's from. So if you can tell me what state he's from, that will be pretty impressive. But this is what he sells on webinars. He sells handguns by webinar. And this is his gun that actually appears in the John Wick movie. He designed a whole lot of guns that we used during the movie. And he sells mainly to women. And he sells mainly very short pistols to women for protection. So let's go to the chat. I see all the chats lining up here. Mexico, Texas, Texas, Texas. Oh, you guys are so good. It's Texas, rock and roll, baby. Well done. Maybe part of partners, current, past, clients promoting the webinar. Very good. Thanks, Dennis. That's great. You are right. Gordon Bond this is a Gordon Bond gun. He's a great guy, Gordon. And he sells straight out of Texas to all over the US and then ships guns all around the US. Isn't it? You know, First Amendment rights, the right to bear arms. I won't say whether we agree or disagree with it, but I will tell you that people are buying guns. The star on the gun gave it away. The people are buying guns based on webinars. This is his number one sales mechanism. How do I know that? We met him in a webinar course that we did in the US about 8 years ago. So, phenomenal. And I've been watching his progress. Actually, I was chatting with him recently. And whilst I've never bought any of his product, Landi has shot the laser versions of his product in a television studio in Florida. So I wanted to share that with you. Number two product that sells by webinar is the primary way is hot dog stands in New York. This is a $90,000 US investment. This is the stands. You can put them on any street corner in New York once you get a license for them. It's a franchise, and he sells these by webinar, $90,000. So the idea is they have 3 or 4 regions available now in New York. So obviously they sell them primarily to New York-based residents. It's $90,000. You pay $1,000 deposit on the webinar to hold your spot in order to go through the due diligence process. Scarcity mentality, we only have 3 available today, put $1,000 down. That's the webinar process for selling hot dog stands. So with that, we want to come to services. Now, there's a price point on services which is around about $1,000 US, which the experts, whoever they are, believe that is the maximum that you can sell and get good sales on a webinar. I would say that that's pretty true in my estimation and my experience. We don't use that price point. Our price point on webinars is more around the $1,500 US mark. And we do pretty well at that rate. I do notice that when we sell something under 1,000, we get much more take up, but you know, it's just not where we sit in our business line to have those sort of products under 1,000. I am going to be trying another product soon, and it's going to be a $97 product on a webinar. So, and it's going to be a pretty interesting product. It's not that we're hoping to sell 100 of them on a webinar and make $10,000. That's not the case. We're hoping to sell about 10 of them on the webinar and then upgrade 2 or 3 of those $97 ones into tens of thousands of dollars. So that will be our product and our service that we're going to be coming out with in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so service-wise, try and keep it under $1,000. If you're having to pay for Google advertising, you may want to consider having a product there under 1,000, but then having a bump on that for some people up to a $2,000 or $3,000 product. And you'll normally bump about 20% of the people who buy your product. So if 10 of them buy it for $1,000, that's $10,000 you've made, but 2 of those will bump up to $3,000. So that'll be $16,000 that you make there. So that's a fair enough angle for you. We can get into data and everything later on. For now, I just want to go to the chat. Actually, I want to go get out of the presentation just for the moment. And I want to come down to literally looking you guys in the face and say, do you have any questions or comments at this point of time? If so, let's put up your hand and let's throw it backwards and forwards. Anything you want to share, any comments, any feedback. Lovely to see you here, Pat. It's great to see you, Shazar, Carol, Corbus, good to see you. Vicky, lovely to see you. Dennis, great. Brad, congratulations on your recent award, Brad. That is just fantastic. Brad's a fantastic musician, and he just won Best Independent Artist in South Africa for his album that he brought out this year. That was amazing. So well done. Rock and roll buddy. He's a great singer. I've played on stage with him once. I'd love to do it again. He's a great guitar player too. Philippe, you've got your hand up, so over to you.
Yeah, question. What my entry ticket for design services usually is at least $10,000, like Australian or something, but still that's so do you think I should create an intermediary product around $1,000 to give another step?
Well, essentially what you could do, and this is what I'm going to trial, so don't take my word for this, but I'll share my secret trial here, is I'm going to be selling a product that involves consultation with me in a group environment for $97. Okay.
Mm.
It's going to be limited, but my angle there is to see what really good prospects I've got once I get into the group. And then I'll take them on a journey. One of them might end up being a Circle of Excellence member, but a couple of others might end up buying, programs in the thousands of dollars mark. So that's going to be my angle. So if you're looking at a $10,000 product, what you might want to do is do something similar, which is really low, and have like a 2 or 3 step thing that you do with people, say over the period of even just a week. We're going to meet 3 times or something like that. You work it out, but you get them to spend money. So it's not free, because when people spend money, then you know that they're definitely keen to advance themselves. But then out of there, you can show them all the things that go wrong if they try and DIY it. And then you can move them into your $10,000 product, Philippe. That could be something that you can do. As I said, watch this space. I'll be able to give you feedback in about a month's time, so that you can see that. Okay. Jilly, I saw your in the chat here. On webinars, you've suggested or directed people to a membership site for subscription model or access to regular education webinars. What's your thought on subscription membership being promoted via educational webinar? 100% good. I think it's a great idea. And I think it's fantastic, providing your price point is right. So, your industry, which is in healthcare, that could have a fairly hefty price point to it, because nothing in healthcare is cheap. So it's not like you're in the personal development industry where people go, oh, I can see that online on Google, which is the biggest mistake they make. But I think, yeah, you could definitely do that, Julie, from, having a product even up to $1,000 or maybe $2,000 or something like that, $100 a month membership site. And if you pay up front, you get it for $900, so you save three payments or something like that. That could work. Route a great webinar. If I may ask, I think it would be good to welcome Mel to the COE and mention about her red effect theory if you have a minute towards the end. I would love to welcome Mel. Thank you so much. And I will do that. That was a private message to me, but I read it publicly because I think it's a really good thing. Okay. Any other questions? Any other comments? Great. I'll say no to that. Yes, Mel. Mel, welcome to the Circle of Excellence. It's lovely to have you here, and tell us about the red effect before we move on.
Sorry, that put me on the spot. I was just actually about to ask you about the question that I put in the chat. So
I didn't see the question. Let me just go back.
Shift my brain a bit.
What are the differences in the structure of a sales webinar versus educational? Okay, let me answer that while you're gathering your thoughts, and then we can get a couple of quick insights from you, and then I'll jump back into the next thing I want to share. So firstly, I'm going to share a really great structure for a sales webinar very soon, okay, with you. So the difference between that and an educational webinar is an educational webinar, you've got to definitely do a lot more interaction. Hence, what I tend to do in all of these webinars is I have times, this is the first one you've joined us on, but I have times where I literally kill the presentation. I come and talk to you and do the things I'm doing now. I'm constantly backwards and forwards in the chat, which can be a little difficult if you're not used to Zoom. So you've got to just bear with yourself and apologize to people the first couple of times you muck it up, or if you have a technology issue. So there's a lot more interaction, I feel, in education. You want to know that people are on board. You want to literally eyeball people. And it's lovely to see, I really love these webinars. It's great to see people here. Pat, so good to see you. Sam, it's great to have you on the webinar as well. So and also you can really see who's engaged. Secondly, from a structure point of view on an educational one, is I think you can do a lot more. So on a sales one, you want it less is more. You don't want to confuse people. Confusion costs sales. Okay. On educational, you can do more. You can go deeper. And, you know, I think even on an educational webinar, Mel, you can go into really technical things if you want to. And today we've covered some technical things, which I wouldn't necessarily do if this was a sales webinar. I think an educational webinar can be a bit drier, and I don't think you have to pay as much attention to the quality of your slides. You know, I have a slide format for these webinars that I use all the time, but it's not the ones I use for my sales webinars. And the sales webinars are totally different. I spend a lot of time on my slide design and everything for sales webinars. On my educational webinars, I just try and make them look what you need to have in order to get the message across, but I don't spend hours on them, okay? Whereas I can spend a whole day building a sales webinar. So the other thing is in sales webinars, I will always put case studies in. So there'll always be case studies to bring it home, and it will always be examples and things like that. In an educational webinar, you don't necessarily have to do that. Okay, so tell us a little bit about Mel Sherwood. Take 2 minutes and tell us about the red effect.
Thank you. Thanks for having me in the circle of excellence. I'm so really pleased to be here and can't wait to see what unfolds. So a little bit about Mel. I specialize in presentation skills and personal impact. I have a program called the Red Effect, which is really about, at its core, about making choices about how we show up. So every moment of every day, we have a choice about how we respond to things, how we react to things. And the Red Effect is methodology that people can use to take stock and show up in the best way possible for that situation. So for example, if you might want to show up as more radiant, enchanting, and dazzling in one situation, and in another way, you might want to be more responsive, empathetic, and diplomatic. And you might have noticed I use RED as an acronym. So helping people to reflect, explore, and decide on how they're going to show up. So that's kind of the core of it. And I'm looking to expand that into a sort of wider program that encompasses all of the things that I offer in terms of communication skills, training, and coaching.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, and well done. And just where are you based?
I'm based in Scotland, in a place called North Berwick, just outside of Edinburgh. But I'm also Aussie, as you can tell. Well, you might have told, yeah. I don't sound very Scottish.
No, you don't sound very Scottish. So on the call today, we've got New Zealand, we've got South Africa, we've got Australia, we've got Scotland, we have Sweden on the call, we have France on the call. I think I've got them all. Yep. So as the photos are shifting around. And I'm also very happy to report that we've just got our first Circle of Excellence member based in Bogota, Colombia. He just joined this week. Fantastic guy. So I look forward to having him on a couple of calls as well. So welcome to you and welcome to anybody else who's here for the first time as well. Let's jump back in. So now I'm just going to change my view a little bit. So you're going to have a slightly different view of me as we get back into our presentation. That's because I'm going to head into what we called just then with Mel, the detail. So the detail is coming. So be prepared for the detail. Let's go. Okay. What sells in a webinar? We know guns sell. We know hot dog stands sell. But what about the perfect webinar? Let's go back here. What about the perfect webinar? Now, some of you may know who Russell Brunson is. He is the CEO and founder of ClickFunnels. And I had the opportunity to go to one of Russell's things a number of years ago, and Landi and I, met him briefly. He's a nice guy. I've always loved this webinar structure, and I must say I use quite a bit of it in my structure, and I'm going to take you through it. So this is his content. It's not my content. It's Russell Brunson from ClickFunnels content. So let's start with the intro. The way he likes to do it is to, in his introduction, have these 5 key areas. Firstly is a bold promise. Okay. And his bold promise is like, he calls it the ruler. It's like whacking you with a ruler. It's like the stretch. Okay. So at the start of the webinar, he'll say, today you're going to learn how to make $1 million in the next 5 minutes or something like that. It's a really super bold promise. Then he'll move from that to hooking you to the end. By the end of this webinar, you'll know how to A, do this, B, do that, and C, right at the end, we're going to share this. So he gives you a reason to stay to the end of the webinar, because of course, the other bit of data with webinars is that, particularly sales webinars, is that most people don't stay to the end. Now, I have to say with us, we've been fantastic at holding people to the end of the webinar. In fact, on Landi's last webinar, we had more people at the end of the webinar than we did in the middle of the webinar, which was really good. So, but traditionally, a lot of webinars drop off during the webinar. So Russell's hooked to the end. By the end of the webinar, you will do this and this and this. Then he has something that commands attention. We call it the authority piece. It's like, you know, Philippe, I would do this. Something after this webinar here, I'm really proud to say that this month I have received this award or something like this. It's something that commands attention. Now, it doesn't have to be about you. It could be about a piece of statistical data. And that's something else that could command attention as well. I use a lot of that in my sales webinars. I use a piece of statistical data right up front to command attention. Then qualify yourself. Who am I? Why listen to me? Why should you trust me? Those questions need to be answered. So a little bit about yourself. We don't do that in educational webinars. The reason you guys are here is because you already know basically who we are. And then future pace. Future pace is, I want you to imagine that 3 years down the track, this and this and this will have happened. Those 5 things go into his introduction. Then he's going to move after introduction into the content. Now, the webinar has one premise. So for instance, today, my premise is, you know, how to utilize webinars inside your business. That's my one thing for today. And as you can see, I am actually using this formula today because I'm sharing 3 things with you today. I told you what they were at the start. So you have secret 1, secret 2, and secret 3. And what he's saying is that in each of those secrets, you have to break down their existing belief patterns. So you have to show them that they're wrong, and then you have to build a new belief pattern for them. And this is key. So this is why this is such great content in the way to build a webinar where you're going to sell your services. So you can't sell your services if the person on the other end of the webinar is going, yeah, but I do it this way and it's always worked for me, right? So you'll never sell them anything if you do that. So you've got to constantly break this down and then rebuild it. Okay, and so feel free to take screenshots or whatever, or you can just Google Russell Brunson's perfect webinar. He's even got a webinar on the perfect webinar if you want to go deep into this, and you'll find that online. Next, he moves into, this is when he comes out of these 3 secrets. By the way, when I do these 3 secrets, I do something a little different, is I put a case study after secret 1, a case study after secret 2, and I normally have my pitch after secret 2 before secret 3. And I've learned, and Russell doesn't do this, but I've learned that by pitching during the middle or towards the start of your webinar, people find it a lot less salesy. Now, you've got to remember, we've got nobody on this call who lives in America. So Americans are used to going to a webinar and getting pitched something at the end. For us, we're like, oh, this is an interesting webinar. Oh, gee, they're sharing so much good content. Oh, no, here comes the sale. But they don't do that if you pitch early, right? And on my last webinar that I did, which was, as I said, about 3 or 4 weeks ago now, you know, we had 80-something people on the webinar, as I recall. About 50% of the people have booked, maybe 60% of the people booked. I was blown away that at the end of the webinar, people hung around. I probably had 40 comments in the personal chat and group chat saying things like, amazing content as always. Thank you so much, Mike. We really love coming to your webinars. You always give us something to think about. There's always something different here. I was blown away by that, given it was a sales pitch webinar. And I actually printed it out and kept it. And I showed Landi afterwards. I said, check this out. And she goes, well, what else did you expect? So I go, this is really cool, right? And so I think when you put the sales pitch in the middle of your webinar, 2/3 of the way through is the perfect spot for me. But I've even trialed by putting it in the very first thing after the introduction, and it works just as well. So what Russell does is he goes to, let me ask you a question. Now, he's got 4 parts to this. So I want you to understand the diagrams and everything. His first part, as you can see by the little left drawing there, because he likes to draw his little people, is he uses one of the 4 things that's below there as his first question. He uses, is money good? Or information alone won't help you. So I've just given you information, but information alone won't help you. It's action that will help you. He uses us versus them. So, you know, we know this, but you guys don't know that. And he also uses only excuses. So, you know, you've learned this, but maybe your excuse is, I can't afford it. I can't, you know, I don't have the time. I don't have this. So he addresses that up front. Then he goes to his next question. So his next question comes out, and his 4 things he targets here is, you know, do you have disposable income to buy this or not? So it's fascinating because people go, oh, something's expensive. Like you're selling a service for $1,000 and they go, that's expensive. But they don't realize that by buying it, they're going to make at least 5 or 6, 10 times the return on investment immediately, like straight away. They don't realize that. I mean, it's crazy stuff, but so you have to actually put that in there and let them know. Then he goes into money or excuses. Which one are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on money or are you going to focus on excuses? He also does the handhold. So we're going to hold your hand. We're going to take you on this journey. And he does the reluctant hero. The reluctant hero is, you know, when I started out, you know, I didn't know this either, but, you know, this is how I've done it. And I've come up, and now I'm in a position where I don't feel comfortable sharing this with you because it's not who I am. I'm a back room boy, but, you know, it's that sort of thing. Then he goes to his third thing, which is money replenishes itself. So, by the way, he only uses 1 out of these 4 things in each of them. He doesn't use all of them. So he decides based on what the webinar is about. So money replenishes. So that's something you could use to sell a service. Is like, you might be going to spend $1,000 on this, but, you know, if this doesn't make you $1,000 in the next 3 months that you're going to use it, we'll give you your money back, providing you implement, you know. Or your 2 choices are do this or don't do it. Say goodbye now. Say goodbye to a life of struggle. Say goodbye to not having money. Say goodbye to not having the best clients. Or his next one is, if you only get this from spending this amount, how cool would that be? And then he finishes off with breaking old habits. So this is your time. We've got to break old habits of coming to these webinars but never implementing. Your 2 choices are today is to take control of your life or to let your life control you. You can do this now or later. If you choose later, it may not be here. The price may go up or something. And then what he calls the close is put your hand on your heart, really, and tell me what this is. So there's some different ways, but the way he's doing it is he's literally got 4 questions that are part of his closing mechanism. So I think it's a really good technique. It can sound really salesy if you don't get it right. And I've seen a lot of people where I sit on their webinars and they use this technique and I go, oh my gosh, this is so contrived and so terrible. But when he does it, it doesn't sound salesy at all. So this is about expertise. It's about really thinking through this. And then finally, this is how he works his three secrets. He calls it the domino effect, the big domino. So the first secret is what he calls the vehicle. This is what we call the blueprint, the thing that's going to take you from A to Z very quickly. Then his second secret always addresses your internal beliefs. So this is the one that really breaks down your internal beliefs and go, okay, well, I know you've always done it that way, but here's another way. And the way you've done it, you're holding yourself back. And the third secret always addresses external beliefs. This is things that society believes or that are taken as the norm in something and breaks them down. So that's the way his 3 secrets work. So if you think about that, if you're designing a webinar, Philippe, that's going to be on, design, and you've got, why does design always fail as your big promise, and you're going to have the 3 secrets to great design, then your secret number 1 is your blueprint. Your secret number 2 is killing off their internal beliefs and why their internal beliefs aren't serving them. And your secret number 3 is why the whole design industry doesn't work as a whole right now. And this is, if you do this, you're just heading into being in a sea of sameness. And then he leads from there into those 4 closes into the let me ask you a question. So I love this. I think it's a very, very good process to use on a webinar. And it's also something I wanted to share that's a little bit different than our process that we teach through the 10 slides. Not dramatically different, but different enough to give you a different perspective and allow you to choose one or the other as a technique. Okay, so why webinars? Let's bring this to a close and then let's go to any questions. I love webinars because this is a controlled environment. Okay, I'm sitting in our office. I've got the heater on. As you can see, it's cold. It's winter here. Got my scarf on, got my jacket on, but I can control the environment. It's a way in which you can share information one to many. So it's a great way to add value. So we're adding value to existing clients on this webinar. You're all existing clients in one way or another. So you're not here because you're not a client of ours in some way. So it's a one-to-many way rather than having to do this 28 times. It can drive traffic to either sales that you want to make or to meetings that you want to have, like strategy sessions, discovery sessions. So I often do webinars where I have QR codes. And in fact, the webinar I did into Latin America last week that's turned into our new Circle of Excellence member, and maybe a second one comes out of this as well, is from a QR code on a webinar. So don't tell me webinars don't work. I mean, you guys that are Circle of Excellence know how much Circle of Excellence costs. So don't tell me webinars don't work. So it can drive traffic to that. It also gives you touch points. It's lovely. Like, I was looking at Pat's smiling face before. Last time we saw her was in December, live in Melbourne, Australia. And, we're following her journey into Europe just recently with her partner. And so it's great to have this touch point with people. And also it gets you non-geographic. I think we've got 6 countries of people on this particular webinar today live, and then others will listen to the recording. Normally on this webinar, we have about 60 people listen to the recording in the 24 hours after this, the video recording, and then it goes out after that, and then we lose track of how many people listen to it after a while. But, it gets you non-geographic. People come from all over the world to do this, and that's great because it means if you've got a product or a service that you want to sell that is not, representative of you living in a suburb, in a city, around the world, or in a country town, then webinars are a great way to do it. So that's what I wanted to share with you today on webinars. We've got just a couple of minutes left. So I just want to go to anybody and say, are there any final questions? And if not, go to the chat and tell me, was that useful? Did you find that useful? Did you get 1 or 2 tips out of it? Just go to the chat and give me some feedback on that. I've got a few new messages here. So use those comments on the sales webinar as testimonials. Can do. I'd ask about that one. And really useful. Thank you, Carol. Structure was helpful. Thank you, Mel. Useful for sure. Thanks, useful. Gives me courage, Anthony Lassanai. Yes, you need courage to do this. Well, it does take courage. There's no doubt about that. It literally does take courage to do this stuff. Not anymore for us. I mean, we've been doing it for so long. It doesn't take courage. But I mean, when you're first new to this, you go, yeah, it does take a bit of courage. But I can tell you it gives you great touch points. It gives you extra income. It gives you sales meetings that you never thought that you would have, that you can't create any other way. So for that, it's really, really useful. Jilly, it's been useful after hosting a webinar last week. It's helped me reflect on the things I didn't do that I could improve. Great reminders. Thank you, folks. We're here if you need us. Mel, I'm used to working on Zoom, but for, where'd that go? but not doing webinars as such. So feeling inspired, great. Theo says, recognize a common approach on social media are breaking down old beliefs that are locking in replacement beliefs. Great. Perfect. Thank you, Shazar. Lovely to see you as well. Diane would like a webinar on how to get the best out of Zoom. Yeah, it's a good idea. Definitely we can do that. Inspiring Brad, thanks for the shout out. No problems at all. We'll see all of you later. Have a wonderful day, wonderful evening. Get some rest if you're in Australia or New Zealand, and we will catch you on our next webinar. Bye.